This is one of the biggest moments in the history of role-playing games, ever. And I'm not saying that lightly. The future of Dungeons & Dragons will likely be determined shortly, and everybody is talking about it. You've probably heard about this already. We're of course talking about the update to the Dungeons & Dragons open game license. Now, there is a ton of misinformation out there on this, about what the new open game license means for creators, or for games like Pathfinder and the OSR movement, and even for role players like you or me. There's a lot of scary questions being asked in the community right now. Will Pathfinder die? How will this affect third-party games? Is this the end of OSR? Is that lump benign? All these questions and more will be answered in this video, as well as they can be anyway. Maybe not the lump one though, you should see a doctor about that. Now, you probably didn't know this, but in a previous life before becoming a YouTube video monkey, I was a contract lawyer that negotiated international contracts in an extremely complicated legal field. I know, this gig is a massive step up. Now, I did not have the joy of working in games and copyright, but I have read a lot of different papers, interpretations, and legal opinions on the open game license topic, and I've basically pulled together the general gist. So, here you go. Here is the definitive guide to what's going to happen with the new open game license, or OGL for short. Now, quick caveat. Firstly, this isn't legal advice. I'm not your lawyer. I'm your clown. Honk honk. Sorry, this is the only way I could think of making legal talk fun and engaging. Trust me, I hate this more than you. Secondly, you should be very wary about anybody giving you their legal analysis of this scenario. There's a lot up in the air right now, and a ton of misinformation out there. That said, I'm 100% correct. I mean, look at me. Do I look like the person who would give bad legal advice? Honk honk. Actually, don't answer that. Okay, so we're rolling up our enormous clown-sized sleeves here and digging in. The fury online is all about the open game license for Dungeons & Dragons. This was originally published in the year 2000 to license the use of Dungeons & Dragons by third-party creators. This was an open license which basically gives permission to anyone to produce Dungeons & Dragons compatible content without having to pay Wizards of the Coast, owners of Dungeons & Dragons. Very simple. You could make anything. Then, in 2016, this open license was carried over to 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, and 1 billion Kickstarters were born. Everyone was happy, the Mushroom Kingdom thrived. I'm getting rid of the nose. There, now I look more serious. There was a darkness brewing, a grave shadow that grew in the east. Because Wizards of the Coast saw companies like Critical Role, MCDM, and armies of third-party companies sell supplement books, and Wizards grew jealous. The boys on the coast thought to themselves, a new license agreement would give me power of command. How I would drive the hosts of Dungeons & Dragons, and all men would flock to my banner. Or something like that. I mean, they probably mostly just saw lots of money floating around and they wanted a piece of that pie. Do not hit me in the face with a pie. Do not do that. Okay, sorry, there was a bit there. It's not happening. It's my living room. Now, the open game license, the OGL, is being updated from OGL 1.0 to OGL 1.1. 1.1 is the update that everyone is terrified of. Now, we haven't seen the full text of the update yet, but the substance of it has leaked from Wizards of the Coast to a number of what I would consider trustworthy sources. Journalists from Gizmodo have seen it, industry veterans have seen it, and what they are all reporting is consistent. Hell, Kickstarter director of games John Ritter has already negotiated parts of the new OGL with Wizards of the Coast. It's almost certain that what we're hearing about it is true. The 1.1 OGL update is written to revoke the previous 1.0 OGL that everyone from Pathfinder to Silverplate, the 5th edition supplement where you play as a hot dog, rely on to produce their content. This means the previous OGL will end, and if third parties just want to create D&D supplements like before, or sell their existing ones that were originally created under the 1.0 OGL, they will need to sign the new 1.1 OGL with Wizards of the Coast. Okay then, so the 1.1 OGL can be thought of like an update to the terms of service. You know, the thing that you scroll by really fast and just click accept when presented. But the new OGL 1.1 has some really nasty elements to it. In fact, I've seen some lawyers argue that it doesn't even qualify as an open license because it's so restrictive. Firstly, the new OGL provides that creators have to register their creations with Wizards of the Coast. That's new and will give Wizards total vision of their competitors' products. OGL 1.1 basically gives Wizards unmitigated access to the books and business of anyone relying on it. That's basically the equivalent of throwing the Palantir to Pippin. This belabored Lord of the Rings reference is kind of getting a little bit squeaky. Secondly, creators have to provide a non-exclusive, perpetual, irrevocable, sub-licensable, royalty-free license to Wizards for any content created using the OGL for any purpose. That basically means that third parties are giving Wizards the right to use their content for whatever Wizards wants, and Wizards won't have to pay those third parties at all, and it's permanent and can't be revoked. Thirdly, any creators who make over $750,000 while using the OGL must pay 25% royalties to Wizards of the Coast. That's a huge portion of money. Now, I get it. $750,000 sounds like an unfathomable amount of money. I mean, I wouldn't sneeze at it. But this figure is gross revenue, which is all the money generated by a project, not just the profit. In fact, most third parties will make less than 25% of their gross revenue in profit. Paying for artists, marketing, platform fees, writers, these are all very expensive. Wizards would often be making more profit from these third-party books than the creators do. In fact, these royalty fees could end up resulting in third-party creators losing money on supplement books. So what does that mean? Well, it means a lot less third-party supplement content for sure. Maybe we won't get to play as a hot dog in the future. And creators who have been extremely successful, perhaps even unforeseeably successful on platforms like Kickstarter, might get ruined because they get too much support. Suffering from success, their crowdfunding might be too successful. They go over that magic limit, suddenly they owe 25% of money that they didn't expect. Not to mention, that $750,000 revenue threshold can be changed by Wizards in the future. Maybe they'll make anyone with a revenue of $500,000 have to pay, maybe even less. The new license allows Wizards to change it at a whim. It also lets Wizards terminate their agreement with a third party in a pathetically short notice period. Only 30 days. 30 days! Imagine, you're a third party creator. You're on the final few days of running your Kickstarter campaign, and then you get a letter in your door from Wizards of the Coast telling you that you can't make your game in the system you've been using, and you have 30 days to comply. You've already written the supplement. The design work is done. This will kill your project immediately. Suffice to say, the OGL 1.1 is going to have a lot of third-party companies like Kobold Press, Paizo, and much more very worried. These terms are particularly bad, and I bet that most of these companies are already in deep consultation with lawyers. But most third-party companies are just really some fella in their bedroom. They won't be able to challenge this OGL or negotiate for better terms. They'll just have to accept what Wizards give them. Now, right now, there is a huge debate occurring in the community as to whether Wizards can or cannot revoke the previous license, the 1.0 license. Because if they can revoke it, then that forces companies to have to engage with the OGL 1.1. Now, the most common point that I see get brought up over and over by commenters is that companies could just publish their games using the 1.0 OGL and ignore 1.1. After all, the previous OGL 1.0 states that it is a, quote, perpetual license, right? Well, from a layperson's perspective, you'd think that that means the license is eternal, never changing, like a genie or Keanu Reeves. Thus, to terminate this on creators is a breach of the original license by Wizards of the Coast. I see a lot of people hanging their hat on this, but the term perpetual is a legal word and it has a legal meaning. Wizards are likely to argue that because the OGL 1.0 license does not explicitly say that it cannot be revoked, that means that legally speaking, it can be revoked by default. So, perpetual is more like a spell that has unlimited duration, but it requires concentration. If it don't say it's not revocable, then it might just be revocable. Thus, for Wizards, the perfect scenario is this. OGL 1.0 is revoked, terminated, gone, and everyone who relied on the previous OGL 1.0 license has to update to the 1.1 license, which would cover not only future work, but retroactively cover previously created work too. Stuff that was done under the original 1.0 license. That means Paizo with Pathfinder will have to agree to the new terms. OSR systems arguably will be caught by this. Anything tangentially related will have to make the decision to agree to the new terms or open themselves up to potential litigation from Wizards of the Coast. They will have to decide whether or not they want to have their ass flying in the wind. And most will likely sign the new OGL. Now, I suspect that in this scenario, many bigger companies will make their own TTRPGs not reliant on the D&D OGL. But smaller third parties don't really have that privilege. Many will just have to do what Wizards say. They will be intimidated by Wizards of the Coast and ultimately will have little power to resist unless they want to risk bankruptcy in the instance Wizards decides to take them to court. Of course, signing the license means that they open themselves up to the possibility of Wizards taking their products, monetizing them, and cutting them out of the picture. This works out really bad for third parties, basically. So the entire tabletop industry in this instance would slow down. Things would likely fragment, there would be less Kickstarters, less supplements, less stuff getting made. A lot of people would lose jobs, and ultimately, all would belong to Mordor. I mean, Wizards of the Coast. But not all hope is lost, because there was some who resisted. A last alliance of men and elves. Wait, hold on. It's goddamn Lord of the Rings script. Okay, there's a lot of money riding on all this, which means we're probably going to see one or more legal challenges to the revocation of OGL 1.0. For example, Sadfish Games and Prudence Holdings, both of which rely on the OGL, have already had their attorney release an open letter on this subject. Legal challenges will likely rely on arguments that the previous OGL cannot be revoked by Wizards, that the license remains, and that the new OGL 1.1 is so transformative as to be a different text and license. Such arguments may reference the wording of perpetual, or language such as authorized, or even specific clauses like Clause 9 of the OGL 1.0 that says, agents of Wizards of the Coast may publish updated versions of the OGL license, but you may use any authorized version of the license to distribute any open game content originally distributed. So there will be probably arguments about what authorized means. The fact that the license has been in use as well for over 2 decades now will likely be relevant too. This will all very much hinge on complicated, technical, legal interpretations and arguments. There's also evidence that's relevant, like the brainmaster of OGL 1.0, Ryan Dancy, is now on record as saying that his intention was that creators would use the original OGL 1.0, even if the terms later got updated. And intentionality does matter. But the text of the contracts are really how we determine the reality of the situation. Wizards will likely argue that it was never their intention to provide a forever license that could not be revoked by them. And these two interpretations, whether the old OGL 1.0 can or cannot be revoked, are at direct loggerheads with one another. They are at odds. Only one of them can be true. There can only be one! Or, in other words, someone is going to have to take this to a courtroom to settle it. And someone probably will. Like I said, there's a lot of money and the future of the tabletop role-playing industry riding on this. We're either going to see a class action lawsuit that pulls together a bunch of third parties, or even just a bigger company like Paizo that challenges it on their own. Unfortunately, they will not be able to face Chris Cox in the trial of combat. But as it stands right now, we don't know which way a courtroom will decide this. We can only speculate at the moment, so take any advice or conversation on the subject with a pinch of salt. There is a long road ahead of us. Nobody knows what will be the final result of all this. But what we do know for certain is the desire of Wizards of the Coast is the worst possible impulse of a company. And if they get what they want, they will likely put lots of small companies out of business. Wizards seemingly want to squeeze smaller companies. They want to tighten their grip on all of them to both carve out royalty fees and also control their products. This isn't by accident. This is the point. They tried the same thing back in 4th edition, but at least during 4th edition, they give companies a choice: produce content under the new terms or continue to use OGL 1.0. That's why Pathfinder exists today. Paizo chose to continue to use the OGL 1.0. This time though, Wizards aren't giving anyone a choice. It's OGL 1.1 or nothing. Face me in combat. There is a very small upside here if you're looking at it from the perspective of a demolition truck driver.
Unit lost.
This is an incredibly destructive decision from Wizards that has totally alienated the entire D&D community, and it has the potential to shake the monopoly that Wizards have on the role-playing hobby. I can't express what a boneheaded move this was. Seriously, I'm dressed as a clown here and I'm criticizing them. Wizards are turning their biggest advertisements like Critical Role into guaranteed competitors. As Princess Leia says,
The more you tighten your grip, Tarkin, the more star systems will slip through your fingers.
we might see a larger variety of game systems come out as indies are less drawn to D&D. But honestly, I think most small third parties will likely still make D&D compatible content under the new OGL 1.1 because the brand recognition is just too valuable to pass up on. But the terms for them will be really bad. It's the big ones that will be able to just move on. For the small guys, not so. And many of those companies will die on the way. And Wizards don't care. So ultimately, no matter what happens in a courtroom, I think it's right to condemn Wizards for the changes to the OGL. And it's hard not to see all of this as a betrayal of the original good faith agreement, the idealism that the open license originally stood for. I think Wizards need to see that the player base is not happy with this change, which is why I'll cover any updates. Maybe not dress as a clown next time though. And if you want to get caught up on all of this, and check out my video on the topic here. And a big thanks to my patrons, especially Sonic Bread and Games Workshop. Patrons get a 40% off discount code for the Blue Skies Mini My Mini Factory store this month. Patrons also get access to bonus videos and ad-free content, as well as exclusive live streams. Check it out on patreon.com/discoursminiatures, and I'll catch you there. Bye-bye!